It's good to have everybody here. Actually, I got some questions came in later this afternoon. Just want to thank us for doing this. The other thing, I want to remind us, our intention is to be drawn closer together. And last meeting we had, we talked about black church, white church. And as we know scripturally, there's no such thing as a black church, white church. And I just want to address one thing about that. We are all brothers and sisters, but that's by the blood of Jesus Christ. Our skin colors is not our choice, but it is for the purpose of God also. I want to remind us that our questions is to bring us closer together, not to push us away or divide us, but to bring us closer together. Okay. Now, with all that in mind, let me get question number one in. And this is to Johnson Street. The group that has been meeting with us have been a great group. It seemed to be a middle-aged group and etc. So the question is, the older people, probably the 50s and 60s up, how do they feel about this? Because normally the racist people are those over 50 and 60. So the question came up, well, how did Johnson elder people feel about this? If you can answer it.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't. I'm muting myself. I don't know that. So I guess we tried to include a variety of people from the church, but most of them ended up being middle-aged because we were already the ones that were studying and ended up like this. I mean, we've had a lot of people watch the videos and I've gotten really good feedback. And so I don't really think that, I mean, the response has been good. I wish we had more. I invited a few more people than we've had, but I don't think the response has really been any different than ours. And I haven't got any comments. I've gotten some comments that I've answered, some misconceptions that I've had to answer and refer people from different parts of the video. I had to go dig it up. I had people would ask me questions, and I had timestamps on some of the videos that I'd be like, go to this video and look at this time, and it worked out really well like that. But I think the reaction's been good.
Okay. Anybody else from Johnson would like to respond? I think that we have made great progress, but we don't want to run into a wall because, the seniors, most racist people are those 50s and 60s and above. The younger generation is really not and don't know until they're taught to be racist. Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments about that? And I'm trying not to be the only one to talk.
If there was any problem, I mean, if there hadn't been people that have outspokenly disagreed with some of the things we've said. I'll put it like that. So I wouldn't know that. I mean, I would say if there was, I'd be throwing a fit or something. But I hadn't had people that have outspokenly disagreed, I guess is the way I would put it.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments before we move on? Somebody else has got to talk beside me. Okay.
You want me to say nothing?
Okay, the last time we ended the meeting, there was two things. We were talking about being comfortable going in each other congregation. And then the other question, and that's some of the questions that I got too, what are other difference we have in the church, you know? I think around the first meeting, we said, well, we got to learn to be uncomfortable. Well, I think that we need to define what does it mean to be comfortable. And one of the questions that I got, and let me see if I can paraphrase it. It's, and I have experienced this also. When we go to a white congregation, or predominantly white, and we go in and we feel like strangers, we feel like we're not really wanted there. And it's an uncomfortable situation. So the question is, when y'all go to a so-called Black congregation, do y'all feel that way also?
I want to start with saying that I know I've heard, and the way to put this, I've heard white people say they go to other, like, just in general, you know, there's a problem with people going to churches and not feeling welcome regardless of those things. And just being at a different church, people get uncomfortable, and there's, you know, some places, how you put it, there's welcoming issues. Some churches are not as good as others as making people feel like they're glad they're there. You know, I've had experiences where you go places and you can go in, worship, get up, go to the bathroom, walk around, and go out the door, and nobody ever says anything to you.
Mm-hmm.
You can go certain places and you go in and you can't get inside the door, and there's somebody putting their arms around you and inviting you to lunch, and you know, want to know why you're there and wanting you to stay and come back and follow up visiting with you. So that, you know, I think that problem even transcends, you know, racial problems. You know, people aren't as or are unwelcoming for all kinds of reasons.
That's a question. Okay. But do you feel, you know, because I've gone places where I have felt.
Is your mic?
Can you hear me? Yeah. That, you know, my stomach is hurting when I get in the parking lot, because I know that when I go in, I'm going to be treated so coldly. So I'm just thinking, do you have any nervous feeling when you go to those places, or you just say, well, I know that they're not going to speak and I just go in anyway? But maybe because, you know, I'm Black, I feel that, you know, when I'm just not going to be spoken to. And when people do speak, some people feel like they're, you know, like they have to speak to you. So what I usually do, I just go and find my seat and sit down and wait for the service to start. And then when it's over, still, people still don't speak. So you're saying, so I'm asking you, is it that you, when you go, do you already feel nervous when you go in because you're going to be treated cold? Or you say, oh, that's just the way they are, and you just go in? Because when you're Black, you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't belong here, I don't fit in. And so, you know, kind of nervous feeling.
I don't know how. I've never. I don't guess I've ever anticipated how it's going to be before going in a place unknown. And I was trying to recollect different, you know, visiting situations and where I felt uncomfortable. I mean, I don't guess I've ever anticipated that, I guess is how I'd put it.
Well,
I can understand how you would. Go ahead, Lisa.
okay. I mean, I can just say from a standpoint of being single, that I've visited churches before, and there have been some churches that I've gone to where like JP said, I mean, I was nervous. I was nervous because I was single, because so many, you know, you go to church and you see couples and you see families. And so I have been to church before in this area where I have gone in. I wasn't trying to be unfriendly or anything like that. I sat, like the middle and everything, but I went in and I worshiped and I went out and no one said a word to me. And a church that I attended for quite some time, the first time that I went, nobody said anything to me. And I had 3 little kids with me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give it another try. I went back and there was one man that spoke to me, and we found some common ground, found out we knew some of the same people, but I still just didn't feel like I belonged because nobody was speaking to me. But then later on in that week, the education minister and his wife just showed up at my door and then invited me to come to Bible class. And after that, then I started to feel more welcome. But there were I went there twice, and nobody spoke to me. So I think anybody feels nervous, and I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying, Beverly, because I've not walked in your shoes. So I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying. I'm just saying that, like JP said, there are a lot of places where people don't speak to you. I think they get in their little cliques or something, and they just don't want to talk.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
And I don't think that's a racial issue there. I think that's just unfriendly there. But we have traveled all over, and wherever we time to go to service, we find a church, we just find it, and we go into it. Sometimes the people make you feel like a criminal, and then sometimes I remember one church in Indiana we found way out in the country, and they found out I was a minister, and they wanted to hire me. Didn't know nothing about me. Okay. So, we have to separate what is friendliness versus what is racial, because we have been in some white congregation, they were not even service communion. Okay. And actually that church was in Arkansas. Now that I remember, I think it wasn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah, that church was here in Arkansas. Okay, anybody else got any other remarks about this? Kevin?
Hi, everybody. So for me, I think part of it is, so traveling to a congregation that's predominantly white, and some of it, there is unfriendliness no matter where you go. Sometimes black congregation, white congregation, you see the same thing.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like the wayward looks that you receive, and that's the most uncomfortable thing for me. So that's the first thing, is the wayward look. And then the second thing that's always the most uncomfortable for me is when I get ready to extend my hand to shake someone's hand. To this day, I'm originally from Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama, to be exact. And so when I reach my hand out to shake somebody's hand, it's always uncomfortable to me, especially when that person looks at my hand first. They look at my hand and don't look at me. And that's the feeling that I get a lot. And it may be unconscious to other people, but that's something that I've noticed a lot whenever I go and visit. People look at my hand and don't look at me. So now I get to the point that I'm leery. Do I even extend my hand to shake someone's hand? Because I, as a brother in Christ, don't want to make them feel comfortable if my presence makes them feel uncomfortable. So those are some of the things that goes on in the back of my mind when I visit other congregations. So just wanted to throw that out there, some of the experiences that I felt.
Now I'm really self-conscious about looking at people's hands when I shake them. I was like, do I do that to everybody? No, I'm not trying to joke about that. I get it. That's the first thing that went through my mind. And
Yeah.
I said that earlier about, experiencing bad congregations because I wanted y'all to know that it happens to other people too, but I've never experienced it to y'all, to your extent.
Okay, anybody else?
I'd say too that, I, growing up in West Palm Beach, we had a big mix of different kind of people all the time, from, Haitians to people from the Bahamas to, we had everybody down there, Hispanic nationalities. And so that's what church looked like always for me growing up. And started doing mission work in Honduras when I was 15. I started, bringing my girls with me to Costa Rica and Honduras. And so I think it was never like this is weird that people are different around me. Like, everyone's different. And it was just, I don't know. I just grew up in an environment that was normal, and it wasn't a very separated black or white or Hispanic. It was very mixed. And I guess looking back on that, I know now that's not the norm for the country in most places. And I think it's something that is helpful to teach and experience as we grow up. It's what we're doing now. It's making sure that we're not separated, that we are one in Christ, and that we are mixing our, members on purpose. So we do feel comfortable around each other. And it's not I only get these experiences every now and then. Even as a minister, we had a brief time in between ministries locally, and I knew everybody in town, like Brother Irwin probably does. And you say, well, I'll go visit. I don't get the opportunity to go visit places because I work there. So we took the time to travel around to different congregations, and same experience as y'all had. Even people who I know me locally didn't say a word to me. The whole congregation, we went in and out of the building with kids and sat there through classes and service, and not a soul said anything. So I think we had the same situations too with our, unfriendliness is all over the place. But I think it's helpful to kind of on purpose create environments that do feel more normal for all of us.
So you're saying that mainly the churches of Christ are unfriendly.
It's a problem, yeah, for sure. I think even trying to get people as a minister to be aware of that and be friendly, regardless of who comes in, whether that's me trying to get teenagers to talk to other teenagers, or young adults, making sure they're talking to people who come in. And it's hard for us to each say, okay, maybe that's not our personality, if you're an introverted person, but I think it's something God's designed us able to do. We need to work on it for sure.
Okay. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Brother Williams, I think that overall, I think the comments that everyone has made has been really good. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be about race. It could be about the different churches and just their welcoming committees, or how their congregation overall and how friendly they are. However, I think we would be naive to think that some of it isn't about race. And so if we're talking about, and I know it's terrible as us as Christians, we're like, oh, we can't believe that some of us would have these ideals or what have you. But a lot of these behaviors and thoughts are actually learned in what we say and do. And if you haven't ever experienced other ethnicities or been in contact with other races and really got to know people, then, I mean, that's part of it as well. So I think when we think about Northwest Arkansas, when we think about Arkansas, obviously we can't boil the ocean, but what is it that Combe Street and Johnson is trying to achieve? I think when we think about maybe having some type of racial bias workshops, or implicit bias, unconscious bias, whatever you want to call it, but it's just bringing knowledge to the forefront, because some of it is generational, but others it's not. And I think it's just really about awareness and not having that exposure. Those are just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Brother Mitchell?
Mike, you're on mute.
Okay, how's that?
Gotcha.
Got it? I was just going to make an observation, and I've done this is my share of visiting around, and the most uncomfortable I've been is when in a Navajo congregation, I didn't speak the language, but I still stayed for had a good deal. But as I listen to us speak, and I'm like JP, I don't want to minimize any of this, but I don't see the racial problem until it's brought up. There's people come to Johnson that clearly don't want to talk. I mean, they're in and they're out before you can even say anything, like they're running to the car. And when I was growing up, and we would make prayers about our enemies and about our problems and situations and stuff, we'd pray that they'd be enlightened and whatever. But anyway, but we was always taught then to pray the Lord that it would begin with me. And I wonder why and how we've come to the place that if we're uncomfortable somewhere because of tradition, because of race, because I don't care what it is, I wonder why we don't see that at least part of the responsibility is on us. Some comments were made, that you're going to feel bad before you even walk in. Well, if your mind's made up, it'll probably come true. I don't know. I don't have problems with other congregations and other colors of people. I just walk in and they're glad to get rid of me because I won't quit talking. So anyway, I just wonder sometimes if we don't spend too much time and too much energy looking at the other person and wondering what they can do different and what they don't understand, and instead of seeing what maybe on our side of it, what we need to do. I'm done.
Well, I wanted to speak to that because I'm a social butterfly. And so I speak to everybody, and it doesn't, so no, I don't go in expecting people not to speak to me, but I know that when I speak and you're very cool to me, I feel uncomfortable. And it's not because I'm looking for you to be that way, but it is that way. Some people will, I tried it. I said, let me see, if I don't speak, will anybody speak to me? And the answer is no. And some people will drop their heads, drop their eyes to keep from speaking. I speak anyway, but I'm just saying, for me, because I'm a social butterfly, I don't care who it is, I'm going to speak. But if you're cold to me, I'm just not like, okay, I got it.
Brother Williams.
Kevin, let me get Kevin.
So I think some of this too, though, is if you look at it historically, we as a race of people, we've been taught that we're supposed to assimilate. And we do a lot of things that we're trying to assimilate into the population so that others don't view us negatively. So for us to go into a situation and have that mindset that somebody's going to think negatively about us, it's based in our reality of the things that we've experienced or how we've been taught or how we have to function in life. So I'm gonna ask a question really quickly, and I'm just gonna put everything on the table right here. So how many of the folks in here that identify themselves as African-American, Black, or whatever you want to identify with, have one voice that you use when you're in the company of folks that don't look like us and a voice that you use otherwise? You see the laughter that's happening right now, folks? Do you see that laughter? What that's showing you is there's a voice that we use when we are trying to assimilate that we don't want you to think of us as being negative. So I really wanted to bring that forward so that you see that it's already in our mind. We have to assimilate. So it's not easy for us to go into there and make ourselves even more vulnerable when our whole experience is being vulnerable. So I wanted to show you that so that you can see what we do every single day in every conversation that we have. What you hear us talking is probably not the same voice, dialect, tone that we use in front of our friends. And you may not have that same situation where you are.
Sister Bland.
Okay, I want to talk real quick because I keep getting disconnected for some reason. As I said, when I was working, I traveled all over the country, and I worshiped at all kinds of congregations, whether they were all predominantly Black, predominantly white, mixed. And each experience was different. But I was just like, I felt the same way. The one brother was talking about, you know, you have to really run me out the room because I talk too much. I don't see, you know, I'm single. I can empathize with this sister was talking about. She's single, and it's hard breaking that, getting through that.
She's freezing.
I just put on my head the relationships because I would put my best foot forward. This is variable. Hello, just tell them I'm coming in there.
Okay. We lost you.
Okay, here I come. Here I come.
Okay.
Okay, turn that off. Would you? Okay. Sorry. You turn that on.
That tablet, I kept it kept jumping off and all that kind of stuff. What I was going to say is I travel a lot, and because of my travels, I saw Black congregations, white congregations, mixed congregations, and I decided that wherever I went, I wanted them to see the best of me and who I represented. I represent my family, my upbringing, all the congregations that I grew up in. And so I put the onus on myself to make sure I didn't become somebody else. And I also didn't expect people to say hi to me. I thought it was my responsibility to reach out because I'm the stranger. And, you know, people are just not gonna, you know, people aren't gonna always talk to visitors. That's just a known fact within the Churches of Christ ad nauseum. We need to work on that. So whenever, like when I was in Ohio and I started worshiping there, whenever I saw somebody come in that I had never seen before, I'd go over, hi, you're a visitor? They say, no, I've been here 10 years. You're the visitor. I said, oh, sorry. I didn't see you, you know, last week or whatever. And so I'm just getting to know all the faces. So I always made it my responsibility to make sure that I reached out to everyone because if I want to be loved, I got to put that out. So, you know, and I appreciate the Brother Mike was saying something about, you know, you got to practically chase you out the building because you just don't go in there with a preconceived notion. And that's how I am. You got to say, okay, we're turning the lights off here. Time to go now. And as you see, I love to talk. But that's my understanding of how we're supposed to be as brothers and sisters in Christ. That's all I have. Okay, you can. I have to give my son-in-law his seat back. Okay.
Okay. Okay. I have been in many churches all over our country. Lots of strange churches. Well, I say strange. When we stop. Most of them are white churches. Most of them are good, and some of them are just the opposite. You know, I ran gospel meetings in white congregations, and they've been fantastic people, you know. So the thing is, what we have to look at, and I'll say one thing. When I go to Johnson Street, every time I've been Johnson Street, the little Tweety welcome that comes out is so sweet from your preacher. He is just fantastic. I don't care what he do, he's going to stop and welcome you. And Larry has always made me feel comfortable no matter where we have been. So I think what it is that we have talked about this. Now we know that we don't have to be uncomfortable. We don't have, when we go to somebody's congregation, especially Johnson or Combe Street, we don't have to walk on eggs or tacks, okay? Because this is going to help us. The other thing I'd like to say is just because we go to a white congregation or a black congregation, that does not make us racist. That does not make us racist. That is just either it's in our neighborhood or that's what we're comfortable at. And we're going to talk about our culture in a minute. But lots of things don't make us racist. And I appreciate some say, there's some congregation you go in, they're just mean, unfriendly people, whether they're black or white, and that happens among peoples. Okay, anybody else have any other comments about this before we move on? Okay, culture is different. Culture is not racism under no condition, okay? But culture can be misunderstood. Would y'all agree with that or disagree? Well, everybody speaks at one time. Y'all like my Wednesday night class. Nobody say nothing.
Brother Williams, will you repeat what you said, please?
I said culture, because we are different kinds of culture, that does not make us racist, okay? But how do we feel with those cultures, you know? Or do we see a difference?
Well, I think this kind of goes back to what Mike said and some of the other people said, and you know, that's something that it's on us. If we feel comfortable, that's our problem. Like if I go to Combe Street and, well, I don't like this song or this song, and that's on me. That's not on anybody else. I need to learn to deal with that and be able to, you know, be mature enough to when something's slightly different for piddly reasons that I can handle that and it's not a big deal.
Okay. Anybody else? Little Mary, Amanda.
Yes. Are we talking about culture within the context of service, like at church?
Yes.
Then in that case, I think if your preference to go to a congregation is what happens in the service and not the people you interact with, I think you're going to be limited. Because if the church is the body of Christ and we're members of his body, and I'm in a congregation based on what's happening, like the songs or just the way the service is going, then I'm doing myself and my brothers and sisters a disservice because I'm not there for my brethren. I'm there for what's going, you know, the way it's going. I don't know the way it sounds. I don't know. But I mean, if you fellowship somewhere and you didn't like the food, I guess, and you didn't like the conversation, I'm just trying to figure out how culture can be a division, because once you get to know each other, it wouldn't stop you. You know, you might just say, oh yeah. I mean, I even hear it like, I don't know. I don't think that difference would stop you.
Yeah.
It's just the way if you get something to say. I'm sorry.
And I agree. And I said, I think that's why it's a maturity issue. Like, you know, as we get stronger as Christians, we get over those things and do them for the right reason. I think I just want to say I 100% agree. And that makes it a maturity issue. Does that make sense? Is that the right word?
Yeah.
I'll be quiet.
No, you're good. You're good. Anybody else?
I think
Yes,
we
Jim.
can, you know, we use that word culture. We're not exempt from the culture we all live in. And we walk into building with it a few times a week, and we're in that culture a whole lot more. So we have a harder time leaving that culture to come into a church culture of worship that God's designed and defined, and leaving all the things the world has defined that weigh on us in different ways. So we have to deal with that too, because we're not leaving it. We're bringing it in there, and we've been influenced by it, whether we like it or not, one way or another. Culture has a play in our life and in how we live and think and what we believe and how we view other people. And that's why we're having this conversation in the first place, because culture has done things to people, groups of people, to say, you see them this way, you need to see them that way. And, you know, it's created divisions because of the culture we live in. And so we are trying to ignore that culture and take on the identity of Jesus to say, well, he doesn't care about that culture. He cares about this is how you're defined. And that's a very different way to come into any body together. That's our unifying factor. It's not this culture that is divisive in so many ways and confusing and misinterpreted and, you know, different definitions and all that is hard to even, that's what we're fighting about. We're using different words, we're using different definitions, and but we've got Christ in the Bible is using defined things that have not changed. And that's our help right there, is it's solid, it's not changing like the culture does. So, you know, we're going to come in with it and we've got to deal with it.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Will,
am I on there, Ron?
go ahead. Yes.
Okay, I didn't want to get in front of somebody.
Oh, go ahead.
If we go back 100 years ago and there's one little white church in the whole town and everybody had to be there and tolerate each other, but yet produce a worship service pleasing to God, they did it. And in today's culture, I drive by 7 churches of Christ on my way to where I go to worship. I think because it's convenient, because it's easy, and we have that choice, we've done a big disservice to the body by not meeting together just because we're not comfortable, just because we're not used to it, just because we're, in my case, too stubborn to do anything about it, and maybe don't even know what to do about it. But the way we live our life in this generation, we have all those choices that they didn't used to have, and I think it's been a detriment to the church.
Okay. I saw somebody else hand.
So I think I got a question for the brother just spoke. So what you're expressing, can you hear me?
Yes.
So what you're expressing in a sense is like just outside of even the racial situation that 100 years ago, that you just had the church, but in this day and time, the things that have really created just even among just one race, so many differences has caused us not to be together. Is that what you're expressing?
Yeah, I think we've, and I'm as guilty as anybody about taking advantage of a good excuse, you know. And I'm with the rest. Everybody's talked about, I'm just more comfortable, or you know, it feels better, whatever. I'm the same way. But like I said, because of our giving in to that and not trying to work with it, I mean, wouldn't it be great if like Combe Street and Johnson we could all worship together, and we could have a assembly together that we just worship God and bring him a praise that he would really be happy with. But yet, you know, I've got to drive by or whatever and go to where I'm comfortable or where they tolerate me or whatever. So yeah, I think our culture divides us, so that we're not as strong or not as big a group anyway as we should be. Hope that answers.
Yeah.
Kevin?
And I believe that's where we certainly want to go. I think we love to get to a place that we all worship in one place. You know, when we start thinking about all the churches over in Asia Minor, maybe we can get to that point where we're the Church of Christ in Fayetteville, the Church of Christ in Northwest Arkansas. So I would love to be able to get to that point. But I think some of the things that we have to look back at is, you know, especially like 100 years ago when folks that looked like me couldn't worship with you. And so when we couldn't worship with you, and then we were forced to go and worship at another place that was set apart. And so now we're going back through the whole struggle of, well, if we were forced to be apart, now you're saying that we ought to be back together. We ought to be back together because biblically that's what we should be doing. But people are using those same biblical excuses to separate us to begin with. So there's a lot of things that have pulled us apart that we're trying to get back together. And it's not going to be easy to get back together, to get past some of the cultural things. Like you may say something one way, I say it another way, I sing this way, you sing that way. It's because we've been apart for so long. But it definitely has to take those baby steps to get back there and understanding what got us to this point and why are we here. And I don't know if it's just because, we all have implicit biases or differences, but I think things have led us to this pathway where we're apart from one another. And now we need to get back together.
Okay. Amanda?
This just makes me think of a puddle. Like let's say in the street, a pothole made a puddle, and you got your nice suit on or your nice pantyhose, stockings, dress, and you don't want to step in the puddle, so you're just gonna I'm gonna try to get over this puddle, and that puddle represents all the things that have done to divide us, the culture, racism, all the things that have divided us as brothers and sisters, and we're trying to figure out, how do I step around this puddle? How do I not get messy trying to get around this puddle? Whereas a child will jump right in. They're gonna see the puddle, I'm gonna go right into that. So it makes you realize we might have to be like little children about this, to where I'm okay to jump into this puddle and get as wet and messy as I have to be, because I know where I'm trying to get to. And that's unity of the body. And it's a scripture, I cannot remember where it was, but it was saying being eager to preserve the unity. And I think I'm gonna have to look it up, but that word eager got to me, because I was like, wow, like, could I be eager to preserve you? Like I'm running and jumping into this like uncomfortability because I'm trying to preserve unity. Can I get to that mindset? Because it was interesting what Brother Jeremy said, like, you're with your culture more than you're with the your brothers and sisters in Christ. And if you only meet together on Sunday and Wednesday for just a little amount of time, and then like I think Brother Mitchell was saying, people are running to the parking lot. I mean, let's just be honest, we're social creatures. We got a fellowship. And if we don't fellowship, how can we say we're going to get to the discomfort? You can say it, but I mean, is it really going to penetrate into your heart without that fellowship, without like having a fellowship where all the congregations to get together? To me, the first step would just be having a fellowship service where all the congregations get together. And then we're all eating together. Because you can be as, I don't know, to yourself as you want to be until you got to put food in your mouth. Because once you have to put food in your mouth, you got to take some, professionalism off of yourself. So the fellowship would start to get us into jumping into that puddle, because in a worship service, you might have 5 minutes to speak to somebody, and then you're running through it's just being realistic. It might not happen. That jumping over all the discomfort and all the things that have happened to separate us. You can't solve racism trying to run to your car after service. It's talks like these that are going to solve the problems that we've had to incur from the people that came before us, who divided us according to culture, according to the world. So if we're going to step over that world, then we got to like run to each other. And the only way I can see us running into each other is with fellowship. So, I mean, going to a worship service, in my opinion, wouldn't be the only thing that's going to solve the problem, because you can't really jump in a puddle with your nice suit on at the same time. So I'm just using that metaphor to talk about all the stuff we have to get around to endeavor to keep that unity, because Satan is right there roaring, prowling lion, ravenous, trying to get us anything we can, any misunderstanding, any cultural I took offense to that according to my culture. I didn't like the way he greeted me according to my culture. I won't know, because your resentment is going to be quiet and it's going to be in your heart. Until we can fellowship one to another and be with one another, I don't think we're going to get past that point. And I had a roommate, last thing, I know I'm talking a lot, but I had a roommate, she was Korean. And she told me, she said, I thought Black people were dirty because y'all didn't wash y'all's hair every day. And this is my roommate. So I'm like, really? I couldn't sit there and get upset because, we have to live together. So I was like, oh no, let me tell you about it. So I explained to her how hygiene works, with the way my hair works and everything works. And she's like, oh wow, I didn't know. So I had to get to that point to be uncomfortable to have this conversation and hear what she said without jumping on her, getting upset. I was like, okay, let me just hear what you get. Okay, just explain it. What do you think happens? Okay, well, let me tell you how it actually happens. Then it wasn't an issue no more. So it's like, if I can't fellowship with you, them kind of questions are just not going to come up. You just won't know. But yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Amanda? Amanda, you and Kevin have both said something that is strange to me, and that's that the things that have happened for years and years still affect how you do things. I don't understand that concept. Do I understand that right? That you personally would act different or act the way you do because of what's happened in our country the last 100 years?
Yes.
Yeah. So Brother Mike, I'll take a stab at it. So yes. So from our standpoint, and somebody brought it up, and they were talking about culture and different things like that, and how people were raised. So my parents always took the approach with us that I've got to be better. I have got to excel far more so that people don't use what I look like as a strike against me so that I won't get to where you're trying to go. And so we have to do those types of things. And I've experienced people calling me out of my name, calling me these types of things or different things because of what I look like. So not something that I'm hearing about in a textbook, not something that I'm seeing on a 60s movie or that my parents may have experienced growing up in Montgomery in the bus boycott, but things I've experienced as a 42-year-old man, that I've had some of these same experience just because of what I look like. And so those are some of the fears that I have, which makes me operate this way and the way that I try and raise my kids so that then they don't have to have the same experiences that I am having or that I've had to grow up with. So the things that we talk about are still very much real. So it's not just what has happened in the past, but there have been things that have been brought forward even till today's time.
I wanted to say that it's good, seeing young people discuss this because, I'm of the older generation where the struggle was real. And as much as things have changed, they still remain the same. And so you not knowing what the culture was, then it's hard for you to kind of like identify with me. Let's just take, for instance, a song, Jesus, keep me near the cross. You know what? Because of the struggles that I've been, I will sing it differently than you because of the struggle that I've been in and things that have happened. And so, when you sing it, Jesus, and you're just going off and I'm thinking, look, this means something to me. So sometimes it's cultural because of the struggle, and then it's brought forward, as Kevin said, and I'm glad for this because maybe this will be the change that needs to happen.
Okay. Very good. Okay. And maybe one of the things, and we won't do it tonight, is that we need to talk about it so that you can understand where you're coming from and where I'm coming from. Because it goes back, it goes back years and years, okay? And the change is going to come what we're doing now. This is beginning to change. And I think that's one of the reasons why the question that came to me, well, what about the older people at Johnson? How do they feel? Okay, because we see the change in the younger generation. And but what about the older generation that's still holding on? Okay.
Brother
Well,
Williams,
Let me just say real quick about that question. We don't have a lot of our older members here, but when we recorded services for a while, we had an older gentleman come in to record a prayer that we put in the service online. And his prayer, it was really close after a lot of racial tension in this country. And his prayer as an older gentleman was only about what was going on. Have we done enough to help the Black community? And after the prayer, we had a conversation, just me and him, and I appreciated it. And he said, I've had to grow out of that, this mindset of my great-grandfather was a white supremacist. And, that's something they've struggled with in their family, to see him as an older gentleman, deal with that and come out of that and asking those questions, have we done enough? That was a great moment of clarity and progress.
And I just want to add, Brother Williams, can I just add
Yes.
something real quick?
Yes.
A lot of what we see today, I witnessed back in the 60s and when I was growing up. And I never thought I would have to, my grandchildren would have to go through this. And it bothers me that it's happening all over again, which tells me we didn't learn anything. Either we're not listening or it was all just window dressing. But the same thing that's going on today are the same kind of racial injustices that were going on when I was a little girl. And I witnessed Dr. King in person. So, you know, when does it end? When do people start listening to each other? When do we change? And I don't know that, well, that's a question, and I'll just leave it there.
Okay. When it's going to change is basically what we're doing now. Because when we understand each other, when we know the struggles of everybody, and we know how everybody feels, and we try to blend them into a spiritual atmosphere, blend them like the Lord wants us to do that, that is what's going to make the change. The conversation between Johnson and Combs Street can probably make a big change in Northwest Arkansas because they'll see the change in us. You know, I always remember the scripture that comes to my mind, let our light so shine before others that they may see our good work and God get the glory to it. So when we do what we're doing now, change will come. When I see young people who are speaking out for what is right, that change will come that we have not seen in the last 50, 60, or 100 years. Okay. We were going to discuss, and we will do, I guess, the next meeting, what can we do as fellowshipping together? Okay. What we can do is come as Johnson and Combs Street can do and fellowshipping together. And of course, we ran over time, so we won't be able to do that. But that'll be our next session. And I want everybody to think about something. When we come back in 2 weeks, what can we do? First of all, we need to thank God for the time, for Johnson really reaching out and saying, hey, let's do this. This was their initiative. And I really appreciate them and thank them for that. But we can do better. And what we do will make a change, not only in Northwest Arkansas, it will probably make a change in the Church of Christ as a whole. Okay. Anybody else have any other comments before we close?
I just wanted to tell Kevin that I look at people's hands when I shake them too, so I apologize also.
Yeah, this hand.
And I wanted to add to what, and we're kind of joking, but somebody had the question, and we can talk about this next week or address, and Matt's not here, and he wanted to know if there's other things that we do like that. And it's funny that you brought that up, but are there other things that we need to be aware of that are either insensitive or make people uncomfortable that we don't know? And just think about that for next week. I mean, and I know I kind of joked about it, but for real, it's not, you know what I mean?
A smile would make it better. Kevin?
That's right. That's right. A smile would definitely make it better. And I want to say to Brother Mike, so what you did, you were listening to Amanda and I on what we said. But what you did was you were vulnerable enough to ask a question based off of what you heard. That's what we need more of. You didn't leave it at that as, well, I think I'm hearing this. But what you did was you asked the question. And so you bridged the gap between our generations so that we can try and hear each other and understand what the actual position of each person is. So I appreciate you for taking the time just to even ask that question
Yes.
to both of us.
Okay, Panda.
I just wanted to tell y'all the scripture I was talking about was Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3, eager to maintain the unity of the spirit and the bond of peace. I just want to add that.
Okay. All right. a good session tonight. 2 weeks from tonight, it'll be what? 12/19? The 19th, JP?
Yes, that's correct.
The 19th, we'll have another joint session. Before we ask Steve to pray, you know, this has really been good. It opened up our hearts and it make us understand each other. You know, it's like a marriage. When you first get married, you don't understand each other. You don't even know each other. But the more you love each other, the more you understand and the easier to live with each other.